Welcome, everyone, to episode 82 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan, coming to you from the continent of California. It is a beautiful sunny day out here in California. It's a good Monday morning. It's Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, whatever you feel like calling it. But you can check out all 82 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast available on iTunes at Gully Blanchard. It's GULLYBLANCHARD. Can also check out some of the wrestling writing that I do at No Coast Bias. Also, all podcasts are hosted there as well. I do a little bit of writing for the Sacramento Kings at a Royal Pain, which is through Fansided. Thanks to Rafael and Jonathan for being really cool about that. So again, royalpain.com if you want to see my contributions to the Sacramento Kings. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Gully Blanchard, GULLYBLANCHARD. This used to be a one-person podcast where I would just kind of spout out some gibberish, talk to some pretty interesting people. And then I brought in two of my friends. We had a really good run doing a lot of fun shows. It was probably one of the highlights of our friendship. And that kind of went a different direction just because sometimes, we're all in our mid-30s. Life happens. It's hard to do that stuff on a week-to-week basis. Shout out to Ricky and Marcus. Get well soon, Marcus. So I'm back to doing a one-man show where I just talk to people that through social media or through the real world that I find to be either interesting, entertaining, or people that I think I could have a great conversation with. And today's guest is no different. He is Chris Walder from The Score. He was on a previous podcast that I did way back in the early days of the Gully Blanchard podcast. Really enjoyed this conversation, man. So, Chris, welcome back to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. It's definitely been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, man. I know you're doing some work with The Score now. For those in the States who aren't familiar with The Score, I have a rough idea of what it is just because I follow you and Jimmy Corderas and Caroline Shred. But for people who don't know what The Score is, how would you describe it to someone and where can they follow you on Twitter?
Well, the Score used to be a television network that Corderas used to be a part of, but now it's strictly a sports app. It's right up there with like the ESPNs and the Bleacher Reports of the world. And yeah, you can download it on the App Store. I'm strictly an NBA news editor, and I'm entering my third full season with the company.
Cool, man. Where can people follow you on Twitter or they want to check out some of the stuff that you do?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hit me up on Twitter at Walder Sports. I talk a lot of basketball, the occasional wrestling, and I also recently started a blog over at Medium, which is a pinned tweet on my page. So check that out as well.
Absolutely, man. I think I actually had a chance to read that blog recently. As someone who I can say that I've went through a lot of the same stuff that you documented in that blog. I thought that thing was, I thought your writing was impeccable. I thought it was incredibly brave to be as honest as you were with that. I'm someone who's dealt with some of those same issues that you have. Yeah, if you guys get a chance, definitely go follow him at Walder Sports and check out that pinned tweet. It's something to where, a lot of showcase and a lot of stuff has been made of mental health issues and things like that as we move into 2018 and move out of 2018 and move into 2019. I think, Chris was very upfront, very vulnerable in his writing, detailing his time getting to The Score. And I can tell you, man, it was resonated real heavy with me. I've been through a lot of those things. And as someone where, we've never met offline, but we've had a lot of good conversations. I'm really happy to see where you're at now. Sounds like things are going a lot better, man. So that definitely brings me a lot of joy.
Well, thanks so much, man, for the kind words. I really appreciate that. The positive feedback I've gotten on this piece has been mind-blowing and very humbling for me. I've always wanted to kind of do a blog like that. It was therapeutic for me in a sense that I can kind of like leave my past in the past and continue to move forward with The Score and the rest of my life. But I'm glad I was able to kind of chronicle my journey to get to where I'm at. And I'm very happy to see that a lot of people have taken very well to it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people, especially online or especially, with social media, we see people having certain positions, whether it be, you in The Score or, wherever we see people working, in ESPN or working whatever jobs they have. And we don't really take the time to understand the nuances and the legwork it takes to get to that position. Sometimes it, can be a lucky bounce. It can be a lot of hard work, a lot of hours put in for a job that some people don't end up being able to achieve what they want to achieve in their dreams. And it sounds like it did take you a while to get there, but man, just to hear, to go through some of that chronicle and some of the rough patches, I can personally understand and identify them, and just to see where you're at now, it was therapeutic for me to read it too. And I think, as someone who's dealt with a lot of that stuff myself, it is difficult to leave some of the past where it is and and move forward to a bright future. But it sounds like it's something you've been able to do a lot with that blog. And man, I wish you nothing but continued success.
Well, thank you, sir. That means a lot to me, and I'm glad people are able to read it and kind of relate to the journey I've been on in a sense, and know that even when it gets really crappy, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and I hope people can kind of see that off in the distance, even when things look super bleak.
Absolutely. So I know one of the things from the blog, and I want to get into kind of what you do now with the score, but you seem like you're a lifelong Raptors fan, man. How did that come about? Like, what are some of your highlights of being a Raptors fan and just covering that team?
Well, I've been a basketball fan for as long as I can remember. So obviously, when Toronto finally got a team back in '95, I was super stoked about that. My parents actually told me recently that I was present for the first time that Michael Jordan came to the Sky Dome way back when, and I don't remember that whatsoever. I think they told me that I was sitting behind kind of like a barrier, so I was kind of leaning over the entire time trying to catch a glimpse of the game because it was so crowded. So that's kind of a cool little story that I just realized. But yeah, it's kind of surreal that I have the position that I do now, because not only was I a fan of the team growing up and still am to this day, but I was able to work for the team for a stretch as well. Coming out of high school, I got or in high school, I did like a victory lap the 5th year and got through the co-op program and was able to land an internship with the Toronto Raptors organization, doing game operations, the guys that are always around the building throwing t-shirts and chasing people and working with the mascot and what have you. So I was able to learn a lot of like the ins and outs of how an NBA game kind of unfolds, not just on the court, but off the court as well. So I've been I've experienced everything with this team. I've been through the highs and the lows, watching at home with my family and my friends, and being there, when Vince Carter returned in the playoffs that year and we booed him out of the city. Like it's I've been through the whole spectrum of Raptors basketball, and now being an NBA news editor, I get to catch them even more closely and analyze them as well.
Now, do you have like a couple favorite Raptors of all time? Because I grew up as a Sacramento Kings fan out here in Northern California, and probably a couple of my favorites have got to be Jason Williams. Mike Bibby as a kid. It was an odd one, but I was a big Randy Brown fan. So do you have some favorite Toronto Raptors, either players or moments as your childhood and even into adulthood?
Well, I started watching the Raptors during the Damon Stoudemire era, so he was one of my early favorites. But my love for the franchise really started to grow when Vince Carter came around. I think that's the case for a lot of basketball fans in Canada. I mean, he was the most dynamic, most athletic, most entertaining player we had ever seen in this city. He was kind of Michael Jordan-esque in a sense with the way he played. His aerial acrobatics, like the guy was literally a human highlight reel. And when he did that dunk contest, I mean, it kind of caught the rest of the league on to where, yeah, Toronto basketball is pretty cool, and it's the place to be right now. So, Vince Carter obviously at the top of my list, but DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry, I love their workhorse ethic and the way that they've kind of lifted this team to places it's never been before. And shout out to DeRozan, who's now in San Antonio. Myself in Toronto wish him all the best. But now we have Kawhi Leonard, and maybe Kawhi Leonard will turn out to be one of my all-time favorites as well.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of meat on that Kawhi Leonard trade bone that I want to get to here momentarily, but I want to bring it back to that Damon Stoudemire thing. I actually saw him because he's a coach at a University of Pacific in Stockton, California, which is about a 45-minute drive, give or take, from where I'm living at right now. So it was kind of crazy, like, to be able to go down and watch him coach a college basketball game. I watched him play UNLV last season. My fiance and I did the drive down from Antioch to Stockton, and just to see him like on the sidelines coaching. And I remember watching him at like Arizona, and like I have vivid memories of watching him get drafted with the Toronto Raptors, and the dinosaur jersey era. I always remember that with Vince and Damon Stoudemire. But so just to see him like coaching a college team it shows how, I mean, we're getting older. I feel it every day, but the guys that we grew up idolizing as kids are now coaches, or in Elton Brand's case, he's like a general manager now. So it's pretty crazy to see all that.
Yeah, God, that was over 20 years ago. Now you're really making me feel old. I turned 30 years old this year, and that going from the 20s to the 30s was like a smack in the face to me. And now that we're talking about Damon Stoudemire and how long ago it was that he was a Raptor, my God, it's mind
Man,
blowing.
I can legitimately tell people, because I'm 34, I'll be 35, God, in about 5 months. I can legitimately tell people like, yeah, now I'm in my mid 30s, and I said it on a podcast a couple days ago, and I said it, and I had to stop myself after I said it. I'm like, damn, like I could really say like I'm legitimately in my mid 30s now. It's crazy.
Yeah, we're getting up there, man. But
Absolutely.
Damon Stoudemire, just to go back to that, I mean, he was somebody who didn't necessarily want to be in Toronto. You know, we were the expansion team, and but he came here and he played very well for us. He was, you know, very short for, you know, 5'11" as a point guard, but he put up some good numbers for us. Obviously, the team never kind of really took off during his time, but definitely on the my personal Mount Rushmore of Toronto Raptors players.
Absolutely. So I want to jump ahead to that Kawhi trade. I know it was a big trade. It was something that was kind of unexpected. I like you. I'm a big DeRozan fan. To me, I feel like he was one of the first guys in the NBA to really come out and be transparent about some issues he has with mental health. And as someone who kind of deals with that as well, reading the stuff that he wrote about it was odd in a sense to where you feel like a little bit more connected to him. And I know, you know, as someone who doesn't live in Toronto, and just kind of watches the Raptors periodically, I found myself rooting for him and Kevin Love a little bit more, just because you kind of understand the interpersonal struggles that they go through on a day-to-day basis. But to see him traded to San Antonio was tough, because to me, he felt like him and Lowry were the Toronto Raptors, you know, in living in Sacramento. I understand being a part of a city where free agents don't readily go. It's a city that kind of struggles to get free agents. And I think that might have been some of the issue that Toronto has had in the past, but to have a guy like DeRozan be willing to make that sacrifice to the team and be willing to say like, no, I want to be here forever, was really cool. And then just, you know, unfortunately the NBA is a business and he got dealt for Kawhi. But what were some of your initial reactions to him being traded and then figuring out that you got Kawhi Leonard back in the deal?
I wasn't surprised that DeRozan was moved. I was surprised that Masai Ujiri was able to land a player the caliber of Kawhi Leonard for as little as he did. And I don't mean that as any disrespect to DeRozan, because I think at the end of the day, he's going to be remembered as the greatest player in franchise history, more so than Vince Carter, who I feel may be the most important player. But what DeRozan was able to accomplish with this team puts him heads and tails over Carter, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, I think change was inevitable. Based on the way the last couple of playoff rounds had ended against LeBron James. And I understand the logic totally that LeBron's now in the Western Conference, so now we kind of have more of a clear path to our first NBA Finals berth, although obviously the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers still stand in the way. But I think Masai Ujiri is not the type of president who gets complacent. And I think he realized that this DeRozan and Lowry combination had kind of run its course. Even so, with Dwayne Casey at the helm, so Kawhi Leonard's, they don't grow on trees, and they definitely don't sign with a team like Toronto under their own free will. So you have to go out there and you have to trade for them. And this is obviously the same path that Oklahoma City went with Paul George. You know, we'll trade for him. We'll hopefully convince him that this is the franchise he wants to be with long term, and we'll go from there. But Kawhi Leonard, you know, looking back on his 2017-18 campaign where he barely played and had a lot of issues with the San Antonio Spurs in terms of the diagnosis of his injury and where he should be coming back. But talent-wise, he's the best player the Raptors have ever had. And if his head is on straight and he's motivated, which he definitely should be with a contract on the horizon, he could take this team to places it's never been before. And that would be the NBA Finals, where we would probably get spanked by the Golden State Warriors. But still, that's a nice place to be for this team and how far they've come. But with DeRozan, I think he's going to do great things in San Antonio. But with Toronto, I mean, giving up DeRozan and Pirtle and a protected pick for Kawhi Leonard and a veteran like Danny Green, who could still play, still defend, still shoot. You do that 10 out of 10 times. It's just the way that the Raptors handled it and apparently not telling him ahead of time that caused all the drama.
Yeah, you know, for me, I think Kawhi is one of the top 5 players in the NBA, provided he's able to come back from that quad injury, which, you know, we won't know until the ball rolls out in a couple weeks here. But I thought the addition of getting Danny Green was going to be huge, just because I think you're adding another wing that can shoot, and not only that, can defend the Ben Simmonses and who you're probably going to end up seeing in the playoffs, and he's going to be able to defend the Gordon Haywards and probably be a good body to put on Kyrie Irving as well. And I think that's huge because from my opinion, watching those series in the past, it looked like there was kind of a gap as far as the defensive standpoint with that Toronto Raptors team. And I think both those guys that they got are solid defenders in Kawhi and Danny Green. So yeah, unfortunately, it is a business, and you will have to part with. You'll have to break a couple eggs to make an omelet, but I think adding Kawhi and adding a guy like Danny Green, I think is going to help put you guys in a position to where it's you and Boston in the Eastern Conference Finals, provided, things roll out and injuries aren't, there's no way to predict injuries, but if everything rolls out the way I think it should, I do expect to see you and Boston in that Eastern Conference Finals. And when you get there, all bets are off.
I know, and a lot of people forget because of the way the series ended with Cleveland. Like, the Toronto Raptors finished first in the Eastern Conference, and now we upgraded by sending away our best player for an even better player in Kawhi Leonard. So, we're going to burst through that glass ceiling at this point with Kawhi leading the way, and I'm excited to see how the season unfolds. I'm excited to see how Danny Green fits into the fold. I'm excited to see the young guys that we didn't have to give up to San Antonio. I mean, God bless Jakob Poeltl, but I would move him, before an OG Anunoby or a Fred VanVleet or a DeLon Wright. Like, we were able to keep our young core intact and still upgrade to get Kawhi Leonard, which is surreal.
Yeah, and I want to transition a little bit to another sports team because I had a buddy of mine. Shout out to Ricky Congo, who used to do the podcast with me. He recently took a trip to Toronto, and he went there for a couple days. I think for his mom's 60th birthday. If I'm wrong, he'll correct me. But he said he got a chance to go to a Raptors game, but the highlight of the trip, as far as from a sports standpoint, was going to check out the Maple Leafs. And as someone who's lived in Northern California and Vegas my whole life, hockey really isn't nearly a thing out here. The Sharks are just far enough of a drive away to be far enough of a drive away to go to a game. It's literally something to where the round trip drive back and forth is about as long as the game is. But I know you guys added, if I'm not mistaken, John Tavares. And please, I'm not the biggest hockey fan there is. I fancy myself a lifelong Golden Knights fan, and I'm sure you can catch the joke between the lines there. But what is adding John Tavares to the Maple Leafs team out there? What is that for a novice hockey fan? What does that symbolize?
Well, just because I'm Canadian doesn't mean I'm a hockey fan. If you're not a hockey fan, I'm even less than a hockey fan as you.
I thought it came with the territory.
No. Unfortunately not. But I do support my Toronto sports teams. I've never actually seen a Maple Leafs game in person, which is unfortunate because I did work at the building they play in for over 5 years and I was never able to catch a game. But what I can tell you is that acquiring John Tavares is huge for this city and the direction of the team and their chances of finally winning a Stanley Cup or even getting the Stanley Cup finals. Like, I know they played last night. I was at the office and I think it was like a 7-6 final score. And I was following Twitter and everyone was talking about like how potent the Maple Leafs offense is. And man, this is the year. I know it's still early in the season, but this is the year we're finally going to get our act together and hoist the cup. So optimism has never been higher. They're definitely an aesthetically pleasing brand of hockey. If you like plenty of goals, they're going to give up plenty of goals. But if you're down with 7-6, 8-7 scores, then this is the team for you.
So it kind of sounds like they're the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns team, to where they're gonna score 130, but they might give up 135 on a nightly basis.
Oh, you're going to need a defibrillator on standby watching this team because you're going to have plenty of heart attacks every time they score a goal, and then 5 seconds later, there's another goal going in on the opposite end. So it's going to be frustrating, but it's also going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, that's interesting because I admittingly I don't follow it nearly as much as other people do, and I don't really follow the Sharks just because, again, they're like, it's about 90 minutes just to get to the SAP Center to where they play, and then to have to turn around and go back for a sport that I'm not keen enough to do that for. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's always interesting to hear about, how big that sport is in other parts of the world.
My office is right in the center of like the entertainment district in downtown Toronto. So now that the Leafs are back and the Raptors are back, the only thing that bums me out is that traffic is going to be way worse getting to and back from the office. There's going to be a lot of hardcore hockey and basketball fans with some beers in them walking up and down the street. So I got to be extra careful on certain nights.
You know what's funny is that's how it'll be in San Francisco next year, because this is the last year the Golden State Warriors are going to be playing in Oakland. Next year they move to a real posh, new posh arena in pretty much in the middle of the heart of San Francisco, which is a couple blocks away from where the Giants play. So I just imagine getting into San Francisco itself on any day, getting in and out any day of the week is definitely a challenge. It's something to where I tell people it's probably an hour to San Francisco, but it's another 30, 45 minutes to get to where you want to get to in San Francisco. So I just imagine kind of the same thing, like a night where the Giants play a rival team and the Warriors are playing at home. Just having to get out of San Francisco around that time is going to be the same sorts of challenges. It's going to be chaos.
I think Toronto was just named the worst city in North America as far as traffic is concerned. So pity me, world.
Oh,
It's not fun. I do it willingly, and I do it with a smile on my face to get to my job. But at the same time, it's crazy how much time I've spent in my car. It usually without traffic, it takes me half an hour to get to the office on a good day. But since that's never the case, I have to leave about an hour and a half before my shift starts.
yeah, that's roughly about the same for me, dude. Where I live out here in Antioch, it's about 20 minutes to work on a day where there's no traffic, but on a day where there is any semblance of traffic, like I've got to get out of here an hour and a half early. And I just know that I'm not moving for a certain, like you kind of know the spots in the drive where you just know that you're not moving no matter what you do.
Well, that's why you got to download the Gully Blanchard podcast so you have something to listen to on these long drives, man.
Exactly. That's why you can check them anywhere you get out podcasts at Gully Blanchard. But I want to transition into wrestling because I know you are a wrestling fan. I think we talked about this on the last podcast, but how did you find wrestling? Like, was it something you got into WWE as a kid, WCW? What were some of your earliest memories as far as being a pro wrestling fan?
Well, in elementary school, because I was never allowed to stay up and watch Monday Night Raw when it was live. I think it usually aired at 9 o'clock on TSN, but they aired it the following afternoon, which is when I caught Raw most of the time. And the same for Nitro. They would air that on Wednesday afternoon. So people would spoil it for me during the school day, and I would have no idea what they were talking about. But I was starting to catch on to some of the names, like the Steve Austins and the Undertakers and the Shawn Michaels. And I remember my grandfather bought me a VHS tape when I was a kid, and it was like the best of Shawn Michaels, and it was hosted by Doc Hendricks with his crazy ass outfits. And it had like this one match. It was the SummerSlam match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon for the IC belt at the SummerSlam, and that's my earliest recollection of like sitting there in front of the TV and being like fascinated with the specific match. And from then on out, I was catching Raws, every week. I was watching Nitros all the time. I was there for the NWO era, the DXs of the world. I saw Goldberg in Atlanta, beat Hogan for the world championship. Like those are my fondest memories when I was a kid. And while it's been difficult to keep up with the product lately because it's been so hit or miss and it's been more missing, believe me.
Yes.
I'm trying to, and I did have a stretch at the Score where I was actually covering events, which was a lot of fun as well. The 10-year-old Chris Walder would have been smiling and giving me a thumbs up for that. But I try to expand my horizons more now. I'm watching a lot of New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'm watching a lot of wrestling in England, Progress Wrestling. So it's not strictly WWE at this point, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely not the Attitude Era or as good as it was back in the late 90s.
You know what's funny about you talking about getting into like your New Japan or your Progress now, and I can just speak to my experiences and definitely speak to yours, but I wouldn't have really been able to find New Japan or Progress without the rise of social media and Twitter. Like I can't tell you anything I knew about Progress really before I got in heavily, got into Twitter and got into, reading through different websites. So I think it's really interesting now to where we as wrestling fans have access to so much more than I think we would have had around that Attitude Era. What I mean is like the Attitude Era, you had your main three. You had your ECW, your WCW, and you obviously had your WWE. But I think back 20 years ago, it was really hard to get anything. I knew that there was wrestling in Japan just mainly because it was formatted a lot differently, but I didn't know who any of the superstars were. I didn't get a chance to watch any of the matches just because it was so hard to gain access to that content. But now you can watch guys like Pete Dunne, in progress, or guys and girls you may have never heard of. I just got introduced to Walter about 6 months ago because of what was going on around WrestleMania. And that was all through, following certain people online and catching the GIFs and catching the reactions to certain matches. So I think it's interesting where now we have so much more access to this buffet that is pro wrestling than I think we've ever had before.
I listened to another podcast called Post Wrestling, hosted by two guys, John Pollock and Wei Ting. They resonate. They live in the Toronto area, and they do review a Raw, review a SmackDown. Like they would discuss those shows, and that's how I kind of keep up with the WWE product when I'm working and can't necessarily watch it myself. But they would do side shows covering the New Japan events, and they would rave about the quality of wrestling and the storylines and the storytelling. And I was like, man, this is so refreshing, because they would consistently complain about Raw and all of the holes in their stories, and then they would go to New Japan and they'd be like, man, look at Kenny Omega and Hiroshi Tanahashi and Kazuchika Okada, guys like that. So that's when I started subscribing to New Japan World. And this summer I watched the G1 tournament in its entirety, every single match, which is a chore because of how many matches and how many nights it is. But it was amazing to see the quality of wrestling. And I don't get that from WWE anymore. And that's disappointing. They're focusing more on the entertainment aspect of professional wrestling, which is fine because that has its audience. But I'm old school. I like to see two guys duke it out for 30 minutes and have a 4 to 5 star match. That's what keeps me interested and still watching wrestling.
Yeah, and see, I think there are a couple of those matches periodically on Raw. And I know we talked about this before we recorded, but I am now in my mid-30s. You just entered into your 30s, but I know we both work a lot. We both work odd hours. We both put in a lot of hours on a day-to-day basis. But the ability to catch a 3-hour Monday Night Raw, a 2-hour SmackDown, a 1-hour NXT, and a 1-hour 205 Live is really time-consuming nowadays. Like, I haven't even got a chance to open up Super Showdown yet, and I'm blatantly biased about that one because I'm half Australian. And shout out to Buddy Murphy and the Iconics. Glory to Australia, we got the cruiserweight title. But like, I haven't even had the time, even with this weekend. Like, I haven't even had time this weekend to be able to start and get through Super Showdown. So I think that there are some good matches, and I've always been of the belief that I think this era of pro wrestling is one of the best from an in-ring standpoint. Bell to bell. I think that you have your Seth Rollins and your Kevin Owens who will put on a good 20-25 minute match, but there isn't that sizzle as far as from a story standpoint that there used to be that I grew up watching. And I am the same way. Like, I'm old school in the sense to where I miss a logical, compelling story that had two guys or girls that were following a story that was relatable, that I could understand, that would have a climax with a match that might have been like in a steel cage or would have been like a one-off. And now it feels like they burn through those matches on a week-to-week basis, and there's not a lot of depth to the characters that the way there used to be.
Well, if you look at the ratings for Monday Night Raw over the last couple of weeks, they're historically low. They're some of the lowest, if not the lowest, that the show has ever had. And I think a lot of that is, you can put so much blame on Monday Night Football and Dancing with the Stars and other shows that are soaking up an audience. But at the end of the day, if you're not hooked, if there's not, a compelling enough story to make you watch week after week, then you're not going to tune in. You're just going to go on social media to see the results. You're just going to catch clips on YouTube, which WWE seems to be doing a lot of these days. Like, that's how I keep up with the product, as well as listening to other podcasts. I don't find a reason for me to watch Raw or for me to watch SmackDown. I'll catch the pay-per-views, I'll catch the NXT takeovers, but for Monday Night Raw, a show I grew up watching, a show that I was can't miss TV for me, I just don't care enough to see it anymore, because if you're getting 3 hours of Raw and maybe half an hour of it is worth watching, that's not good enough.
I agree. I'm in the same boat to where, like, I work tonight from 5:30 to 10 o'clock out here in California, and it used to be on a week-to-week basis as a kid. Like, I would plan my whole Monday nights around watching WCW Nitro and then watching Monday Night Raw. Like, when Raw would go to commercial, I would change to Nitro. When Nitro had a match I wasn't interested in, I would change to Raw. And I think now, like, there's just nothing about 2018 Monday Night Raw that I feel is appointment viewing. And I think with television, that market, that landscape is changing to where I think the only things that are really appointment viewing are like Game of Thrones and sports games, because those are things that you can't miss Like you can't. It's very hard to like miss a Toronto Raptors against Milwaukee Bucks game. They might start at 7. It's hard to start that at 8 o'clock and not come across like an alert from like the score or Bleacher Report with what the first quarter score is or stuff like that. So I think it's really hard nowadays for Raw to be a compelling week to week product, and it shows in the ratings to where fans just aren't tuning in the way that they used to. Now that could be, with social media, it's easier to not have to watch a Monday Night Raw 3 hours from 5 to 8. You can check it out online, and you could do what you do, subscribe to a couple podcasts, and you can kind of get a digestible version of the product. But it is not as much appointment viewing as it used to be.
And that's a shame, because I think WWE has so many talented guys and girls that people need to be keeping their eyes on. But the company just made so much money off these new television deals that there's really no more incentive for them to try. Like, they're getting paid, they're getting the money, and the ratings aren't as important as they used to be, because we're living in an era of television where not a lot of people are sitting there on their couch watching live programming anymore. They're streaming, they're using Netflix, they're getting streams from online. That's the wave of the future, and I think WWE is suffering from that to an extent. Not so much. Like, I don't think the company is in any danger of any, horrible financial implications, but I think it hurts the product. And for the hardcore wrestling fans, which I still consider myself to be, again, like we've been talking about, there's just not a lot of reason for me to kind of devote 3 hours of my night each and every Monday, plus another 2 hours on Tuesday, plus the network programming on Wednesdays. It's overload for my brain. And I love wrestling, but I love basketball too, but I can't watch as much of it without thinking, okay, I need to get up and I need a break from all of this every once in a while.
Yeah, and that's how I am with being out here. I'm a big Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I think even now, like, I stream the games, on the Chromebook that I have, and I'm not getting directly, it's hard to sit there and watch 3 hours of any product and be invested to where it's like, oh my God, I can't get off the couch. And I think now, like you said, with a bunch of different streaming services and things like that, like, I watch all the programs that I DVR during the day, I watch on my phone when I have a half hour in between jobs, or when I have, a half hour to spare here and there. And I can just pull up like ESPN Plus and watch the TV show that I wanted to watch. Or I can get home late tonight around like 10:30 or 11, and I could watch that program earlier, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything. Or if I feel like I miss it for one episode, it doesn't feel like it's the end of the world. The way missing one episode of Raw back in the day definitely felt like you were missing out on a pivotal part to a story that was going to climax at a pay-per-view.
Well, when Stranger Things returns to Netflix, trust me, I'm going to be streaming that entire season in 1 or 2 nights. That's the kind of show that keeps me compelled, not WWE, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we got through Stranger Things season 2 in about a couple days. I'm in the midst of doing season 2 of Ozark right now, and I'm starting episode 5. And it's the same thing. Like, I wish there was more hours in the day to be able to get caught up with it all. But Ozark's another one, man. I know you said before we got on here, you were looking for some new Netflix shows. I think Ozark's one. If you haven't got into it, it is kind of similar to Breaking Bad. I think Breaking Bad was a little bit better, but it's in that same realm. And if you get a chance, there's 2 seasons of Ozark. I think Ozark was a great show.
Add that to the list of 15 shows that I haven't been able to watch yet.
Yeah,
there's not enough time in the day, man.
There's not, even with all the different streaming devices. Like, I watched Ozark, yesterday. I watched the end of season 4 on my phone while I was working yesterday. And same thing, like, I get home and it's like, oh, there's so much more I have to do. There's not enough time in the day to be able to watch all that kind of stuff. Now, there is enough time in the day, if I want to stream the Golden State Warriors or the Sacramento Kings, like, I'll find myself doing that. But even with those teams, like, order of the Kings against, I don't know, the Wizards, like, it doesn't feel like it's the end of the world.
By the way, bless your heart for being a Sacramento Kings fan.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Good luck with that this season.
I have the same motto I've had for the past 15 years. I mean, we get 82 games,
I thought your motto would have been "There's always next year."
That died about 6 years ago. I stopped that one. I've gotten to the point where I'm like, man, at least we get to watch a team from Sacramento play 82 games a year. Yes.
You could be Seattle, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so at least Seattle has the Storm. We don't even have.
Yeah.
we don't have anything to look forward to. Like, it's odd because I think like where we're at now with this team reminds me a lot of where the Clippers were in the early 2000s, to where like there was so much talent there with Darius Miles and Lamar Odom and Elton Brand. We thought Miles was going to be talented, but like there was so much talent there that like you figured eventually they got to put it together. And I watched that game where they played the Warriors in Seattle, and I don't know, it's preseason, it's hard to take a lot from it, but good God, like the game keeps moving back to the 3-point line, and we've got 4 7-footers who fell in love with the 18-foot jump shot, which is the worst analytical play of the game, and just oh man, 82 games a year, we get them.
Well, jump on the Raptors bandwagon if you so choose. There's plenty of room.
I think that's going to be a bandwagon that fills up relatively quickly if Kyrie ends up playing as good as he. I'm sorry, if Kawhi ends up playing as good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think Kyrie's going there, but I do think that's going to be a fun team to watch with Lowry and Leonard. But I'm interested to see that dynamic because I haven't read a lot of good, stuff from Kyle as far as like being excited for this. He kind of seems like he's a little, to coin a phrase from Matt Hardy, he seems like he's a little broken.
No, look, the media is really blowing that out of proportion. Like during media day, he looked like he had like a scowl on his face, like he was just kind of ticked off with the number of questions he was being asked. But he's just the kind of guy that, he comes to work, he does his job, he's a blue collar worker. I think it's going to obviously take some time for him to kind of forge a relationship with Kawhi Leonard. And, people forget, when Rudy Gay was traded, like Rudy Gay and Lowry were closer than Lowry and DeRozan was. Like Rudy Gay is the godfather of his child, and he was traded away, and he got over that pretty quick. I think winning basketball games and being in contention for a championship kind of will heal over any wounds that come from the DeRozan deal and how that whole situation played out. So I'm not worried at all about Lowry like underperforming or not being motivated. Like this is our guy. Kawhi Leonard's our best player, but as Raptors Twitter always points out, Kyle Lowry over everything.
Is that so? Kyle Lowry is sort of the face. He has moved into the face of the franchise role. He's kind of taken that DeRozan role to where, you first think Raptors, you're going to think, well, at least in Toronto, like Kyle Lowry is kind of the face of the franchise.
He's been our best player during the DeRozan era. Like DeRozan puts up the sexier numbers, but Lowry has been so much more important to the success of this team, and the advanced metrics show it. I can't go into it because I don't know off the top of my head. I feel like I've written this like a million times, but DeRozan, yeah, he's the one that gets all of the notoriety because he's the one putting up the highlights and putting up the 30-point games. But without Kyle Lowry, this team does not win as many games as it has in recent memory.
So that's interesting because especially living out here, like we don't get a lot of the Raptor stuff out here. Like we'll get them when they come through. They'll do the Bay Area loop, they'll do the Sacramento and the Golden State, and they'll probably go up to like Portland or they'll go down to LA or stuff like that. So it is interesting to get a different perspective about a team that I don't know if it's not as much of a national team, but I think the coverage in the States isn't as heavily Raptor centric as it is. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this team, because just to get a different perspective and get sort of an in-depth perspective of a team that I'm interested to see how they play this year.
Wow, I'm shocked. I'm genuinely shocked that ESPN does not cover the Toronto Raptors.
I mean, they covered them at the end when they, with the Dwayne Casey firing and all that other stuff.
Thank you for that.
They were quick to pile on that bandwagon, which I had a problem with. Like, I don't know enough about coaching to where, if Casey was the right guy or whatever, but they were quick to. I did see that. I did see the DeRozan trade and the Dwayne Casey fire, and they were quick to have an opinion on that stuff. But day-to-day Raptor stuff, unfortunately, we don't get as much of it out here as we should.
I had to keep myself from going on Twitter or watching TSN because we broadcast ESPN First Take, and I think we also show the Skip Bayless stuff from Fox Sports. Oh, I had to keep that far from mine because I know those guys were piling on to my Raptors after we got swept by LeBron, how we were being called cowards, how we were bowing to the king, and yada yada yada. And that was so demoralizing to know that was out there because we had such a good year, and for it to all crumble in front of us at the hands of the guy who has, LeBronto, right? That was a meme for a stretch.
Yep.
I mean, thank God we have a fresh start now. We could not go into this season with DeRozan and Casey and Lowry because we'd be hearing the same song and dance we always have. This is a great regular season team. They're going to win 55 to 60 games, but then they're gonna cave in the playoffs. They're going to lose in the second round. They're not a real threat to get to the finals. Boston, Boston, Boston. But now with Kawhi Leonard, man, he is like our saving grace at this point. Even if it's for a year and he elects to go to Los Angeles, which he has every right to because he's an LA boy, I'm going to try and embrace this year for what it is. And hopefully this team could finally get over that hump because my heart can only take so much damage from this team, not living up to expectations. And that has happened too much. And I don't have the shield over my heart like I used to.
Yeah, I've my shield has gotten a lot harder over the years just because I can't keep buying into, the George Hills or the Jimmer Fredetts of the world coming into Sacramento and being our saving grace, or the Thomas Robinsons. I've been burned too many times with this Sacramento Kings team myself to keep believing. That's why I'm like, hey, they play 82 games, they're gonna win some, they're gonna lose some. But I think, the way you're describing Toronto, it's something to where I'm pulling for you guys to play well, if nothing else, because I think it'll be a fun story to see a guy like Kawhi, who I'm a big fan of. Hopefully, he can take that team to the next level.
Well, thanks, buddy, and I'm rooting for Marvin Bagley to be a superstar from afar.
Yeah, it's just that's the best way I could describe my thoughts on this Sacramento Kings team. It's just meh.
Yeah.
I wanted to hit on a couple things. I know we talked about before we recorded. Today is Canadian Thanksgiving, and I want to play the ignorant American card for two things, actually.
Sure.
Do you guys do the same stuff on Canadian like as far as like, is it the turkey? Is it all that stuff? Like, I don't think it's not a third world country. I get it, but like I never knew today was Canadian Thanksgiving. So I have like my Thanksgiving traditions with like, you watch football, you do all the cooking. The day after is the big sales day. But like, is it similar? Like, what do you guys do that we don't essentially? Or am I just
we do the
complete ignorant? Okay, cool. I'm a complete ignorant American.
We don't have football on all day. Like we still rely on American television. So whatever's on, like, your major networks, will catch that. But we still eat turkey. We still have all the fixings, stuffing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, all that good stuff. And we sit down with our families and have a nice dinner. It's literally the same stuff you do. You just get to watch NFL games all day.
So I'm pretty much the exact reason now why Bret Hart hated America in '96. Okay, good. Very well.
Yeah, seriously. Well, you know what? If you were to ask Donald Trump what a Canadian Thanksgiving was like, he would probably say the same thing. And he's your president, so
okay,
you got a little bit of leeway. You get a little bit of leeway
there. Yeah, that's another one. Just oh god, two more. I think it's 2 more years. Oh god, that's
2 more years, maybe less. Who knows?
Oh yeah,
I had to get in my political jab, man. That's what I do. Every once in a while, I'll tweet out something about Donald Trump, and I'll get like 10 or 15 trolls like badgering me, and then I go on a blocking spree. Yep. But on this podcast, it's so free, man. I could say whatever I want.
You can, I'm right there with you. People.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, I was worried that you were like a secret like MAGA supporter.
Oh
or something.
God, no. Oh, absolutely not. I am. It's an embarrassment to see what's happened to this country that I lived in my entire life. That's the best way I can think to put it. And yeah, it's God, it's tough to watch that Orange Goblin be in office. And
Orange Goblin.
It's weird. Like ever since the travel ban, it's like, okay, he can't mess this up any more than he does, and then he does, and then he can't do anything stupider than what he's about to do. Okay, and he does, and then it's just week over week. The guy just it's an embarrassment. That's the best way I can think to put it. He's an embarrassment to this country, and it's 2 more years. That's all I can tell myself.
I can't put it any better than you just did.
Yeah. One more ignorant American question. I'm on a roll here, guys.
We don't live in igloos, by the way.
Oh damn! That was okay.
That answers your second question. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Damn it. The Toronto Argonauts. I've always wanted to know this because I know how big American fantasy football is out here. Does the CFL have like CFL fantasy football?
I think so.
Okay.
It's not very popular. I think TSN might organize CFL fantasy football, but I'm not. Don't hold me to that. But if anyone's doing fantasy football around here, it's NFL.
Okay.
Like that's just the way to go. And my team sucks. My God, I cannot catch a damn break. Yesterday, I think I put up like 116 points, and the my opponent had like 140. So
Mhm.
even when I'm having like a really good week, I'm in such a bad position on my schedule. And I thought I entered my draft with like a really nice receiving core, some solid running backs. Like I have Kirk Cousins, and my three wide receivers are off the top. I think Antonio Brown, who's like the number one ranked guy, and then I got T.Y. Hilton and Emmanuel Sanders, who's been had a nice start for Denver. And then I'm going to be 1-4 now. Like I'm just
I
ready to just pick up my laptop and be like, my God, man, like throw me a damn bone here.
I got Patrick Mahomes late in the draft. Thank the Louis Riddicks of the world who told me he was going to be a star, and I got him late. But what sucked last week was I think anyone does this when they play fantasy football. They try to get a little too cute. They try to overthink something, and it winds up completely blowing up in their face. And I had Isaiah Crowell and Bilal Powell from the Jets, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start Jay Ajayi and Austin Eckler from the Los Angeles Chargers of San Diego. Meanwhile, Bilal Powell and Isaiah Crowell had about 300 yards combined. And Austin Eckler and Jay Ajayi got me a whole 10 points. And I lost by 7. So I remember watching that game, and I was watching that game and watching the Eagles game because simultaneously, because I'm a fan. So I was counting the stats on the ESPN's Fantasy Cast, and right as I tied the game with the Zach Ertz catch, David Johnson scores a touchdown that goes up, and I couldn't make the score up, and I haven't even wanted to look at how many points Palau and Crowell got because it just would have annoyed me.
Those are the worst weeks when you look at your
Yes.
starting lineup and they're giving you like 3 or 4 points, and then you look at your bench and they're like dropping 15 to 20.
Yeah,
Like that's just the kind of like the way fantasy football unfolds, unfortunately. But
that's
if you can
yeah.
stomach it, if you can stomach weeks like that, all the power to you. I certainly can't because I'm very I like to win, even in something as silly as fantasy football, and I've been struggling.
Yeah, no, it's I started 3-0. I'm now 3-2. Just because just trying to get too cute on my lineups. Like I thought I was gonna outsmart the system, and the house always wins.
Well, I wish you well in your fantasy football endeavors. Pray for me to make some sort of dramatic comeback and just win out for the rest of the year so I can even sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I'm relying on Kirk Cousins, so I'm my own worst enemy at this point.
He's one day he'll go 300 yards, one day he'll go 3 picks. That's kind of how that's the Kirk Cousins experience for you.
Oh, brother.
Last thing I want to talk to you about, man, you got a chance to go to Disney World. I'm getting married at a Disney property in about 7.5 months. But what was your big like? Was that your first time going to Disney World?
I went when back in grade 7 with my family. I don't remember a lot from that trip. We have like a photo album or whatever that it's sitting somewhere. But this trip was like the trip. Like my girlfriend, her and her family have like a uh Disney Club membership or something along those lines. So they kind of get discounts on resorts and food and whatnot. So we went there for roughly 9 days. So we explored all of the major parks, and the Food and Wine Festival was going on Epcot as well. So she really enjoys watching like the Disney vlogs on YouTube. So in the weeks and months leading up to our trip, we would kind of catch a lot of those guys and girls and see kind of some of the cool things that they did. And me going on this trip, having my girlfriend around who knows pretty much everything about Disney World, made the trip so much more special because she led me to all the great rides, all the great places, showed me all the awesome food. And this was, yeah, a trip that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life because I've always been a closet Disney fan. I grew up on the VHS tapes. I have like a whole drawer sitting of like Hercules and Fantasia and Cinderella, all the classic Disney films that I loved back in the day and still do to this day. And so wait, are you going to Disneyland or Disney World?
We go to Disneyland a couple times a year because it's about a 6-hour drive. But there is a Disney property in Hawaii called the Alani. It's like a Disney resort hotel.
Yeah.
So that's where I'll be in 7.5 months, man. And it's my life has been turned quite Disney. I was not a Disney fan before all this started.
Right.
I'm kind of in the same boat though, man, where like I go and I pretty much just follow her where she goes, and she gets all the max passes and knows what to eat, knows where to go, knows where not to go, knows how to schedule max passes, and I just put on comfortable shoes and walk a lot, and that's been my saving grace for all this time, is just being able to do that. And it's fun because like I think I've hit my max as far as going to Disneyland because we've been there so often. But I'm definitely at a point now to where like my back in the day, like my bucket list goal was like I want to go to every major league ballpark. I want to go to all these games in the States. And now it's like I'm down to want to go to like Disneyland Paris or Disneyland Japan, or just like travel the world going to these different Disney parks because it's just how much fun it is.
You got to embrace those trips for what they are. Even if you're not a Disney fan, it's just a happy place to be. You know,
Yeah.
always beautiful weather, a lot of fun stuff to do, and you never know when you're going to go back once you leave. So you have to take it all in. And by the way, congratulations to you and your fiance, man. That's awesome. You know, all the best to you guys. And you're getting married in a Disney, background. Like how cool is that?
Yeah, we saw a couple venues in Hawaii, and just to see how her face lit up for that one, I was like, okay, this is going to be the one. And yeah, man, 7.5 months from now.
Well, well, am I invited to the wedding or what?
No.
No?
No,
Okay.
but you will definitely hear all about it, though. I will definitely.
Sounds good to me, man.
I'll send a postcard. It's funny, man, like because with this being a destination wedding, like we've really had to knock down. Like it's hard to just with the guest list. Like we've had to really shave that thing down a bit and have to have some difficult decisions where like these are some people that we've either grew up with or really close with now, and it's tough because it's a destination wedding, and it's not. It's something where we've had to make difficult decisions on who to invite and who, unfortunately, just can't make the cut.
Well, I guess I was cut, unfortunately.
Right.
But I'm expecting that postcard, though, man.
A postcard, a pin, and some other cool Alani swag. It's coming your way to Toronto.
Beautiful. That's all I need, brother.
Cool, man. So where can people check you out again with the score? We're going to send this one on home, but where can they follow you on Twitter? Where can they check out your work and all that other stuff?
Download the Score app on your iPhones, Android devices. One of the top sports apps out there, if not the top sports app. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I use it every single day. I write for it. Check it out. Also, follow me on Twitter at Walder Sports, WALD as in dog, ER Sports. And obviously, check out my Medium blog, which we talked about earlier. Pinned tweet on my Twitter page.
Absolutely, man. Once I post this, I'm going to definitely retweet that pin tweet because I've said it before, man. I think the courage it takes to be that honest, that brave, that vulnerable, and put that out there to sometimes an unforgiving society. I've sat where you've sat, and it's good to see that we've both sort of overcame those things. And man, continued success to you and everything you're doing out there in Toronto.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words, man, and thanks to you for having me on your podcast. It was a lot of fun.
No problem, man. So you can check out all 82 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. That's where we're going to be. We're also on nocoastbias.com, where you can also find the wrestling writings that I do. You can also check out the Sacramento Kings articles that I write at A Royal Pain, which is through Fansided. And you can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, GULLYBLANCHARD. Until then, thank you, Bear. Get well soon, Marcus and Kate. Get well soon, Marcus. Talk to you soon, Ricky. Chris, man, thank you very much for making the time to get on the podcast, and we'll do this again soon.
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
All right, you guys be good. We'll be